Supreme Court, typically on Mondays, is announcing cases. We get further into the month, we start doing the countdown for some that we're waiting for, notably the case in Texas, Fisher versus University of Texas, but also, of course, the 2 days that we had in March where we had DOMA and also the Proposition 8 being discussed. This is same-sex marriage questions before the court. Joining us now to give us a sense of what the court might be up to today, although we never know for sure, Angela Giampolo, founder of Giampolo Law Group, whose practice focuses on LGBT law, corporate transactions, civil rights, and other issues of the day. Angela, thanks for being here this morning. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
It's always tough to figure out what the court is going to decide, number one, whether they're going to announce today what they're going to be deciding. But what's your take now, giving a little distance on both Proposition 8 and DOMA, which are two separate cases, but I'm wondering if you have a general sense of where the court is headed on this.
Absolutely. Like you said, it's always hard to predict exactly what they're going to do. But based on the hearings and a lot of the language and the questions that the Supreme Court justices used back in March, we're fairly certain that it's going to be a bittersweet historical moment when the opinions come down. That is, gay rights activists will get exactly what we're looking for, in that DOMA will be repealed and there'll be gay marriage in California. But legally, how they will go about providing that outcome won't have the sweeping effect that we've been looking for.
Yeah, the DOMA is the same-sex, or the federal case where it seemed pretty obvious, and I was lucky enough to be in the court for the arguments on this. But I was listening, and it was sort of like, okay, this is a law that the federal government should not be impinging its will upon the states, right? I mean, that's what it came down to for even conservatives.
But the arguments that the LGBT activists were putting forward, we were hoping that they would decide it on equal protection grounds and not necessarily federalism grounds. So you're right. I think they will come down and say it was a federalism issue, meaning the federal government never had any right to even create DOMA. But if they came down and used an equal protection argument, then that could have a sweeping effect moving forward. So you're right. I think DOMA will fall on federalism grounds, and I think they'll do away with the Prop 8 case, the California state case, on standing.
There was a question of standing in both, correct?
Say that again?
There was a question of standing in both cases.
Historically, yes. That had never been before the Supreme Court in two cases like this. The Supreme Court had both parties, the Prop 8 and the DOMA parties, brief. Why are you even in front of us? Obama basically said, I believe DOMA is unconstitutional and I don't want to defend it. He wanted to give Edie Windsor her $363,000 back right away. And the Supreme Court justices, if you were in the room, said, then why are we even here? If the president already thinks it's unconstitutional, how did it get to us? So there were really very interesting standing issues in both cases.
Now, those aren't the only cases to be decided, but again, we're still waiting for that decision. The practical application of this, if, as you say, same-sex marriage advocates get, in a way, what they want, which is DOMA goes away, but if it goes back to the states, then are there other cases that might eventually change this, or this is a long, slow slog, state to state to state? Because even since the court heard these cases, there's been legalization, if you will, or the awarding of the same-sex marriage rights to people in other states that didn't even have, what is it, 3 or 4 more states have added that, right? Rhode Island, one of them.
Exactly. Yeah, we were at 9 and now we're at 12.
Yeah.
Just in the last few months.
So where does it go then if they make that decision?
Well, you make two good points there. You mentioned the practical effect of DOMA falling, and then the second point is, where do we go from there? And the practical effect of DOMA falling, it will only have an effect on the now 12 states where marriage is legal. I live in Pennsylvania. So even if I were married in New York, because my partner and I live in Pennsylvania, it will have no practical effect. So DOMA falling but not having gay marriage nationwide basically creates 3 classes of citizens: straight married people, gay married people, and gay married people who got married in New York but live in Pennsylvania. So it's going to be an administrative nightmare until we have gay marriage nationwide. And then you bring up, was this our one shot in front of the Supreme Court? A lot of people don't realize that Loving v. Virginia, the case where interracial marriages were at one point federally banned, that went in front of the Supreme Court in 1952 the first time. And at that point, only 10 states allowed interracial marriages, and you had 40 that didn't. And it took a while, but other cases came up, and it went in front of the Supreme Court again in 1964. And at that point, it was completely inverted. Only 13 states were banning interracial marriages, and you had the rest that allowed it. So I think we'll see cases going back up to the Supreme Court, and it'll be decided differently, and quite possibly only in a few years, because this is moving so rapidly.
And again, on this particular part of this, Angela, the awarding of rights to same-sex couples as recognized by those states is one of the key parts of DOMA, correct? That's one of the reasons why it was such an important issue. Forget about even if it is the most important, which is whether or not the right exists for people to same-sex couples to marriage. But the idea is that certain people were being denied federal benefits based on the fact that they were not recognized by the federal government. You can't even file joint income tax, for example, correct?
Right. Well, I would not be allowed. So even if I were married in New York, because I live in Pennsylvania, those rights will still be denied. But there's 1,138 federal rights that were being denied to LGBT couples in states where they basically had marriage equality, let's say like New York. And out of those 1,138, I'd say there's a handful that are very significant. Social Security benefits, survivor benefits, obviously estate taxes, like Edie Windsor. If her marriage was recognized, she would have paid zero in estate taxes as opposed to the $363,000. So there's significant benefits that were being denied to LGBT couples.
Now, just on the Supreme Court itself, and this will be sort of the last, more general question, as you mentioned, the Loving case took over a decade to eventually make it through the courts, and the situation in the country has changed. Is the court typically and historically more comfortable with allowing the culture in the country to sort of push us toward a legal conclusion, and leaving aside, I guess, 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education, which was a unanimous decision, but it was one also that really kind of reflected, I think, what people were feeling, albeit not in every part of the country, but the majority of Americans. And I wonder if the court does it typically work that way? Does it sort of follow U.S. opinion, or does it sort of set the standard?
Right. I would say a lot of lawyers would like to say that the Supreme Court does not make its decisions based on the political pulse or on the pulse of society, but I think that would be nonsensical to think that. Kagan, one of our biggest supporters on this issue, even said, it was a little disappointing to hear her say this, but it's true. She said, do you think the country's ready? We let segregation marinate. Use the word marinate for 50 years before we made the Brown v. Board of Education. Interracial marriages, we let that marinate for, 15 years. And she was asking, basically, do you think we're ready? So this issue is evolving so rapidly, and there's no turning back, right? I mean, all of a sudden, people aren't going to say, no, I changed my mind, I'm against gay marriage. So my prediction with all of the states coming up, we've already had 3 states in the last 2 months, and I think by the end of the year, we'll be close to 16 states, and then by next year, we'll be at 23 states. And there's actually 2 cases on their way up to the Supreme Court right now, one in Arizona and one in Hawaii. And on their track, they should be at the Supreme Court's doorstep maybe in 2 to 3 years. And at that point, we could actually be half and half. We could be at 25-25. So when this gets back in front of them, I think it'll be a whole different story. It won't be the quote-unquote experiment. If you were in the court, you heard them, they constantly refer to it as an experiment, something newer than the internet and cell phones.
Yeah.
So I don't think that'll be the dialogue in the courtroom the next time this goes before them.
Angela Giampolo, thank you for joining us on POTUS today. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a great day.